Hello, we are now live. I'm in the studio of Tim Rees. Tim's here, as you can see.
Hello.
Yeah, I think we can sort of. Now, this is the 23rd of October 2020, and anyone who's listening will be aware that's when we had the COVID problems and lockdown. And I just thought it'd be fun to record Tim in his studio. As you can see, he's doing a nice still life of a bunch of flowers. And he will explain in a second why he likes to dress as Toulouse-Lautrec. That's totally up to him. But anyway, we just thought it'd be fun to shoot the breeze, as they say, talk about anything to do with art that comes to mind. I thought it'd be fun to kick off by sort of asking Tim. I mean, Tim, as a lot of you will be aware, is a successful artist, incredibly talented guy. He's only been painting 10 years, can you believe it? And selling nicely in America with a couple of galleries. He'll talk about that as and when he would like. But the first thing I thought it'd be fun to ask Tim about was, as I said, he's taught a lot. And the first, the reoccurring thing that you get a lot with students who have either preconceived ideas, which could be seen as being a little bit woolly and naive. So I asked Tim if he could sort of come up with three good rules of thumb to sort of put people straight. So over to Tim on that one.
Well, I was thinking the first one is a mentality thing, and this comes from first learning how to paint in an open studio around a bunch of other people without any instruction and kind of observing them, and then secondly teaching, and it's this sort of mentality where people who are inexperienced or just starting, they hop up to an easel and begin working with this idea that it's just practice and just learning. It doesn't really matter how things turn out. And while you can learn the odd bit here or there from that, the problem with painting and drawing is that it requires so much repetitious practice. And if you set yourself up to be not doing your most serious work while you're practicing, then that carries over into your studio as well. And just because you're practicing doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get better. You have to be doing good practice to get better, because if you're just practicing bad habits and practicing painting poorly, then you're just going to be learning how to paint poorly faster with practice. And I've seen people painting in the same open studios for 20 years who have never progressed anything much beyond what they first started, just because they're practicing the same things they do over and over again, and if it doesn't turn out, they say, oh well, it's just practice, it doesn't really matter.
And this is really an attitude as much as anything. It's quite interesting, because I think that who am I to say? I mean, I've made so many different mistakes in life, both from painting to paint making to being a human being. We just make mistakes. But I think that also you could apply that in life, that the people who treat it, as the hippies used to say, as life as a rehearsal rather than to really living the event, they're going to be like that in other aspects of their life. I mean, the wonderful thing about painting, of course, is it's a manifestation of so many aspects of life, and I think that what you see in the painting, be it good or bad, it was also a manifestation of the person in their other life, be it working or creatively or whatever aspect of life it is. Would you agree, Tim, that that's also the case, that people... It's when you don't approach things seriously.
Yeah. Yes, and I think the problem with wanting to learn how to paint is that that's a serious problem.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to learn how to paint well, I mean, you can learn a few tricks, or, some artists have a well-defined enough process that you can follow along and get similar results, but if your goal is to learn the craft of painting, which is kind of a different thing, then that's a serious problem and serious business. And if you don't approach it seriously, it's next to impossible to learn how to do it.
It's not as if we're practicing vocational life. This is the real thing, and as far as we know, we only get, tangibly one shot at it. That's another debate for another day, and we're not going there in terms of life before and after. But anyway, what we're talking about is this world, this life, and so tell me more, Tim, in terms of how people step up and do this. Is it because they sort of think, well, I'll just have a go today because I'm going to do it properly another day. Is that what we're talking about?
I think that's some of it. I think another part of it is sort of a self-preservation sort of thing. You know, when we never like to be around a bunch of people who are doing things potentially better than us. And
that's interesting.
And so when you are trying really hard, or even just trying, and among a bunch of people, and you start to feel like you're not doing as well as everybody, then I think a self-defense mechanism kind of kicks in, where we can sort of just shrug it off. And
well, it's almost an excuse.
Yeah.
Oh, it didn't matter anyway because I wasn't really having a proper go today.
Right.
Yeah, I get it.
And it's, you know, I always used to tell people if you're enjoying learning how to paint, then you're probably not doing it quite correctly, because it's just so mentally intensive, it's physically exhausting. There's so many things to remember that if you're having a good time while you're doing it, you're probably not doing all of it. Until, of course, you get to a point, you know, 10, 15 years later where you can finally, you've built in the habit so much that your body kind of takes over and you can sort of do both at once. But it should take a long time for that to happen.
Well, I'm quite refreshed by what you've said, because I've often joked to people and said actually that the act of painting or drawing is is incredibly masochistic, and I can't believe anyone would want to do it voluntarily.
I agree.
And a lot of people have said to me, they turn to me sort of like, where are you coming from? But I think that Tim's touched upon a very interesting fact, because if you're really pushing your abilities and your mind to achieve out there the best you possibly can, this isn't just like freewheeling downhill on a bicycle. It takes pain. Short of having a mousetrap gone off on your fingers in your pocket while you paint so that you can just be in agony anyway, which of course is not going to help.
Yeah.
But we're talking about the sort of concentration levels that are exhausting. And I must admit, most of the artists I know that they are masochists, because this is sort of what we're talking about, because I know that the level of working and painting and drawing that Tim's doing now, we're also having a conversation, it's straining. It is mind-blowingly straining, and I for years, being probably a bit of a highly lazy sort of person, too hedonistic to be a pain-loving artist, I'm guilty of this, because I've been a coward and I've walked away from it. I always say to people, when people talk about the paints we make, it's you guys who do the hard bit. Painting it's painful as can be. Even the physicality of standing there, or you know, the pains one gets in one's neck and shoulders and so on, and I hate to sound sort of puritanical, but in some ways those are good signs.
Mm-hmm.
Tim and I were joking the other day, because I said I find it sometimes a little disheartening when you walk into a life drawing class and everyone's sitting on the same level horizontally on nice comfortable chairs, looking at a nice comfortable model, and therefore producing the same drawings and paintings and compositions as everyone else. And in a sense, you could almost be, if the most interesting view is hanging from the rafters or lying on the floor awkwardly looking up, and then that's where you should be. What do you think about that, Tim? I mean, would you?
I completely agree, and a lot of my artist friends, I think, would agree as well. I mean, one thing that separates somebody who really wants a good painting and really wants to go the extra mile to get something good, and somebody who's just there for a more casual experience, is that person will move around the room as much as they need to and get in any strange spot and work harder or, you know, longer just to get the more interesting thing instead of the more comfortable thing. There was a while, for example, in Chicago when I would do that, and if I couldn't get a spot that I found was interesting to paint in, that was at the easels, I would do, where you're trying to get on the floor, move around, because there would be no point in me, I felt, starting the painting if I didn't think it was going to be interesting enough to be a good painting at the end. Because then you've already lost before you start.
So you don't do what I do, which is I cry, stomp, and go home.
Well, I mean,
close up the box, slam it.
I've done the alternative, which is to set up my own model in a different room, and then just paint that.
I just want to check this is still working because it went on to. I don't know if it does, but it should do. Just keeps going.
It looks like it's still.
Yeah, 10:31. Okay, it probably is fine when it goes into rest. I just want to make sure we weren't just being a couple of clowns spending hours talking in this pompous way.
What else would be new?
Yeah, we've done that plenty of times. But no, I think that's. And what about something on a more physical, technical level about materials or setup and?
Yes.
I mean, I've got one that I learned recently, and when I say I learned recently, I'm early 60s. I started painting when I was about 12, thanks to my dear grandmother, who was an art teacher, and in the early 1900s, she went to Goldsmiths College in London, which is still to this day a very good college for, I think, postgraduate work in fine art. One of the early things and you'll hear it time and time again in terms of when you're trying to do a prepared work and you're thinking about composition, people have said to me over and over and over again that preparatory drawings, sketches, whatever you're doing in terms of drawing out a little doodle sketch just to sort of think about where you're going to be positioning the lights, the darks, the warms, the colds, that sort of thing, is paramount. And I'd heard this 1,000 times. Had I practiced it? Really? No. But it's something that I'm delighted to say since the COVID, I've also done more painting in this period than I have done in 30 years. And I did a series of paintings of a mountain in Wales. And accidentally, although each work wasn't really intended to be a preparatory work leading on to something more major, that's just the way it happened. I first of all did a watercolour, and I liked it. Obviously, when you like your work, it's also suspect, which is worth another discussion in a minute. But I was interested by the outcome, so I thought, you know what, I've now learned a few things, and hopefully, and as we know, because of the nature of watercolour, sometimes it can be forgiving, sometimes it's ruthless in terms of not forgiving. I'd learnt a few of the mistakes in the structuring of this watercolour and composition and also the laying down of the various layers of colour, that I thought, well, okay, now I'm in a better place to do a second watercolour, and with the additional knowledge I've now got from the first, so I did. And again, it was sort of, oh yeah, right, I'm crossing a few bridges that I was unable to the first time around, and then lo and behold, I decided that the second watercolour was also, I was pleased with myself, but that suspect phrase again. And I thought, well, I'm really enthused about this. I'm really getting into this. I'm getting my teeth into it. I'm loving the colours. I know I'm really, really still finding that the subject matter still appears to be fresh to me. I wasn't exhausting it and it was becoming stale. I decided to do a considerably larger oil painting, and we will put in fact I will promise that I'll make sure that as this little snippet of me talking to Tim gets published, that those paintings will be shown to you so you can see how bad a painter I really am. And when it came to doing the oil painting, my wife Karen said to me, "Oh honey, that's a huge leap. You're doing something about 4 times the size of these large watercolours, and are you going to be okay?" I think she was thinking that I was going to blow quite a few hours of work, linen, primer, paints, all the rest of it, etc., etc. And I honestly said to her with confidence, "No, it's okay. I know where this one's going." It was already in the bag, even though I was leaping from watercolour to oils. I knew, in my mind, in terms of execution, the painting was already finished. All I had to do was put the paint up on the canvas. And then at that point, the penny dropped. So in a sense, these works, the other works, had been the preparatory, had become the preparatory doodles and sketches and moving up the line of the more major works. So that's something that I'd learnt. So, you know, I'm, as I say, in my 60s. I should be mature enough to know better, but the penny dropped this year, folks, and at least it did drop. So nowadays, I'm trying to discipline myself more that any work I do consider to execute, that I'm doing as much preparatory work as is reasonably possible.
Yeah, that's a good practice. Like I said before, I did that for years. When I wanted to transition from a more naturalistic, alla prima approach to a sort of planned painting approach, and it helped tremendously. And the other great asset I found from it that I wasn't expecting was that if you are still engaged enough in the design and the topic, like as you said you were, by the time you get to being ready for the final picture, then you know that it's a subject worth committing to a big picture, which is great because then you haven't wasted all that time. And I've been guilty of spending a lot of time on a painting only to realize that I shouldn't have even bothered. And had I done all those steps before, I would have realized before I got to the end that it wasn't worth.
Could you put your finger on more why it wasn't worth bothering with?
Oh, it could have been a variety of reasons. Maybe the pose just wasn't interesting enough, or the design, or the brushwork wasn't working with the painting, and that's something I would have figured out in the preparation. All sorts of possible reasons.
Yeah.
And I think also doing all those studies leading up to it does give you time to prep proper materials, because I think another thing a lot of people are guilty of is they're getting so excited about an idea that they just grab whatever canvas or material is available so they can do it, and then halfway through they realize, oh, well, if I thought of it, had a little more forethought into this, then I would have picked something better. And doing all those preparatory things does give you that option to think about that.
That was very much me until this year. Fools rush in where angels fair to tread, or should we say mature artists fair to tread. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that sometimes I think you get the notion in your mind, the visuals of it. You can see it. You think you can see it up on up on the canvas,
right?
And so you leap in, and there's a lot to be said for it. There's a freshness, but I think that is the work that you should regard as your preparatory sketch, not the main crescendo.
Yeah.
I think also for me, I've learned that if a work is to stand and have merit, I now feel that I have to go through that longer process of the work up to it. It certainly seemed to be the case with the mountains. I mean, there's other occasions. I mean, let's ask Tim a question here. When was the last time you painted a still life like this?
Gosh, I guess it would probably be maybe 10 months or so, almost a year ago maybe.
So, and 10 months doesn't sound long, but in Tim's case, you could be caught a couple of hundred works back, would you say? I mean, Tim has good output.
Well, not this particular year for various reasons, but yeah, I mean, I've done probably 20 paintings
since then. Right? Okay, yeah. And the numerous drawings.
Mm-hmm.
So I know, and this looks great. I mean, I hope that maybe we'll come in, or I'll get some close-up photographs in a minute for the benefit of the people who can't quite see. This is looking great. I mean, that wonderful. Is that a carnation in the middle?
Yeah, I think so.
It's just there. It's popping, and clearly, probably the predominant focal point of the painting is as I call it, the punchline.
Yeah.
It's looking great. Would you go on and do another one of this? I know there's a limitation to how long the flowers are going to last.
Well, for the reason of why I'm doing this painting, no, I wouldn't. I'm doing this painting because we just had a baby and we named her Violet, and an artist friend of ours sent us this bouquet, and so this is really sort of just an homage to the.
I think also it'd be kind and appropriate to name the artist who's being.
Kathy Anderson, of course, and she has good taste in flowers, which is good because, usually my flower paintings, it's like one or two flowers on the table just lying there.
Yeah. Kathy's a lovely, lovely person, and
absolutely.
She's never ever serious for more than about 5 seconds, is she? She's just got this wonderful, gentle, warm, amusing.
But I have seen her be serious for maybe 2 hours, maybe even a little more. Once, when she tried to do a portrait painting, well, I shouldn't say tried. She did a portrait painting, and I think she recognized that she was back to those days of needing to focus and learn, and it's probably the longest I've ever seen her go with a serious face.
That's interesting because in the context of what we were talking about in the last few minutes, it would have been great had she been able to be here and comment upon it. Once we got over the guffaws of laughter that always accompanies Kathy whenever she comes into any room. But I'd be fascinated to be able to ask her about that. What was going through her head, what level of pain she was experiencing when she was concentrating for 2 hours. She might completely disagree with us. She might say that she was off in a rabbit hole in her head of, I don't know, wherever people go what we all think about when we're painting, because that's another aspect, is that when I paint, my mind is sometimes on what I'm painting and how I'm painting and each brushstroke, but I've also got another story going on in my head. I can be visiting a memory or so many different things, and I tend to find that a week later, if I'm on the same painting and I come back to the passage, it's almost like I've read my tracks. The little brushstrokes immediately trigger that memory or that conversation that was going on in my head before. It's as if there's a psychological recordings taking place in the paint, as only you, of course, the artist, would know that.
Right.
But inner thoughts when you're painting, as Tim just said, I mean, I presume Kathy was aware, or was it just coincidence that there's a lot of violet colours, because the child, I'm delighted to say, who's adorable, is called Violet.
I would assume she selected the colors.
You told people that it was.
She knew the name,
okay,
and she found out the name, and then immediately asked for our address, and then the flower showed up a couple hours later.
Well, that's very good going for Kathy, because of course I know she's incredibly colourblind, and the fact that she knows that. Just joking. No, I was disappointed that Tim didn't call the child manganese violet or cobalt violet, or pale violet. But
well, there's always nicknames.
Yeah, so there we go. Other aspects of thoughts going through your head while you paint?
Well, and that's interesting that you bring that up too, because one of the reasons I started to back away from all of the alla prima painting was that it required so much of my mental attention that, as I said before, painting was not necessarily enjoyable. So I went through probably about 5 years where I liked the end result of painting, but the physical act of painting was very tedious and difficult and torturous.
Yeah.
And I didn't really mind, because I thought I would like the end result of the paintings. And the aspect of a more classical or traditional approach to painting, where you are doing the studies and planning ahead and then figuring out all of your problems and then executing the painting, has a level of predictability to it that allows you to tune out from your 101% focus, and so then you can sort of enjoy the process a little bit more.
Yeah.
And now the way that I paint is very, very different from actually even what I'm doing now, this alla prima or more direct kind of approach. And it allows me to be maybe 75% here.
Yeah.
And so there's a danger in that as well, because then you could let your mind go off in all sorts of directions. But I typically end up listening to some music, or maybe playing a movie on the side that I've watched before, just so that I'm kind of engaging with something else.
Yeah.
And it's just a more enjoyable experience. Our life has become so busy now that I don't really get to watch movies anymore anyway, and so I can go revisit something from 10 or 20 years ago. And
yeah, indeed. I think we all go to strange places psychologically when we paint. I don't know if you're aware that that's very precariously positioned at the moment. It nearly twisted out of there.
Yeah, no, I put it there for a reason.
As long as it doesn't drop and we have to blame it on an earthquake.
Well, no, I think we're...
No, I mean, the angles and all the rest of it's entirely up to you. It's
we're good.
I wasn't criticising. I just wanted to make sure you were aware that it was loose.
Yeah.
Tell us a bit about this, because I remember I got a severe telling off from I say severe. I got a very logical telling off from one of my tutor professors in the UK when I was a student in Epsom many years ago. A great guy who's again sadly no longer with us, called Jeff Colborn, and he was a ex-Royal Academy painter.
Oh wow!
Lovely man. And one day, when he's giving me the nice friendly kick up the arse in the first year, he said to me, he came along and he looked at the way I was set up and everything, and he said, "Look, what are you doing? Your palette's a mess. Your brushes are dirty. How can you possibly expect to create order there if you've got complete disorder here?" And at the time, it was one of those moments where the pennies dropped and thinking, yeah, gosh, she's right, because clearly a canvas is going to, one way or another, look like the palette. But then, Tim, I have to congratulate you. This is a mess. From my eyes, I know to you it's tremendous order. Do you want to talk about what's going on here, and also this box, which...
Yeah, so I'll start with the box. This is the New Wave Pashad box, and so it's the one that I travel with. And I've become so used to it that when I'm doing medium and smaller sized works, I like to use the box, either put the canvas on it, but this is a stretched canvas, it's a little too thick.
So this is actually upside down.
Yeah, it's upside down, so the painting should be right here.
Yeah.
And as far as the colors, I used to be quite a bit more tidy and clean with it, and I would even, on breaks, I'd scrape off the extra bits of color that have built up on the paint there. But really, I guess a lot of the blame for the way it looks now has to go to you, because your colors are strong enough that I can leave it a mess, and I still only need a little bit of color to push the color.
Way you've turned my friendly criticism of you back on me. Yeah, I'm totally to blame. No, I just also, I don't know if it's yeah, you can say.
Yeah, you can see that.
Some of this paint here is probably months old, would you say, Tim?
Oh, yeah, let's see.
I'm sort of looking down to these dry, chunky bits here. Well, it is actually
underneath.
Yeah.
Yeah, it gets pretty old, and then again, maybe every once in a while when it gets so full I can't get anything out. Or actually, usually it's right before I travel.
Yeah.
Right before I travel, I'll scrape down and clean it out a bit and then go. But my amount of time that I have available to work now is a little more limited, and I mean, I could spend an hour just cleaning this out and really polishing it.
I'd be interested to know whether you would enjoy it on the next painting or not, or whether it's sort of, it's a bit like when you watch a dog make itself comfortable in its bed, where it sort of does a couple of circles before it sits down, then scratches up stuff, and to make it all nice and worn in and comfortable, like the unmade bed. Whether a clean palette actually would work for you, or you like a bit of chaos going on there that you can create order from.
I actually do like it pretty pristine.
Okay.
Usually when I start a painting, I'll slide the glass out here and really clean it off. I've just been putting off painting so long lately that I haven't wanted to even bother with that.
Yeah.
I just wanted to jump right into it. And even the process of laying out colors tends to be a little ritualistic for me.
Yes.
So I really enjoy that, and I'd rather spend my time savoring that bit than scraping it out.
It's funny because we were teasing each other the other day because I actually enjoy cleaning brushes. Tim confided in me that he hates that.
Well, I don't mind it. I just don't like the time it takes.
Yeah. For me, these sort of housekeeping aspects of painting become a part of the enjoyable process for me. It's all the lead up and the winding down, because I like being around other aspects that are going on in the studio, not just the painting itself. And I see that preparation, and I regard cleaning brushes preparation for the next day. And there's nothing worse. Can you imagine? Well, we're all guilty of it. Coming to the studio and you've still got yesterday's discarded brushes, and in the heat of the moment, of course, you compromise and you pick up a brush with yesterday's paint on, which is probably getting a bit sort of sticky, leathery, and you know you're doing an ill-disciplined thing where you immediately stick it into yesterday's paint on the palette, and because you want to touch up a bit of the painting, and yeah, and you're thinking, why am I doing this? I should be more puritanical, but then again, if it gets you the result, it gets you the result. While we're on conversations of, shall we say, clean palettes, perhaps Tim would like to explain his